OTC PLT horizontal SIG config and configure contingency abort yaw steering complete.
Copy. And PLT performing MPS helium reconfiguration.
OTC MPS helium reconfig is going inward. OTC PLT MPS helium reconfig complete.
Copy.
STM NTD.
STM.
I'll give you 1066 to deactivate pad OISD.
Copy 1066.
EPD and FCP OTC.
EPD. FCP.
Okay, adjust fuel cell loads to between 250 and 290 amps.
Copy and work. FCP copies.
NTD Houston flight on 212.
Code Houston flight.
I can give you step 1050. The BFS pre-flight uplink load is complete.
I copy that. And CVFS. Give you step 1050.
I copy.
SRO NTD.
SRO.
Yes, sir. Step 1068. The KSC area is clear for launch.
Copy. Go ahead.
In all systems, discontinue all non-mandatory LDV traffic for the remainder of count.
This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 9 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Standing by now to go into our final built-in hold at T-minus 9 minutes for about 40 minutes. In 3, 2, 1. T-minus 9 minutes and holding.
T-minus 9 minutes and holding.
This is our extended built-in hold, which lasts just over 40 minutes plus a few seconds. And we are still targeting a 2:20 p.m. launch. No technical issues, and the weather is go.
Entity CVSS.
Go ahead, CVSS.
The T-minus 20-minute GTC dump is complete.
Okay, I copy that. And OTC, step 1083.
Copy.
And OTC NTD, I'll give you step 1087, perform depletion sensor, simulated command removal, and final checkout.
And MTX, CLOX and CLHY copy.
MTS copies. CLHY copies. CLOX copies. So you're giving me 1087?
Affirm.
And work.
Meanwhile, out in Houston at the Johnson Space Center, Houston Flight at Mission Control has been preparing for a launch in parallel with Kennedy Space Center and is ready to assume control of Atlantis as soon as it clears the tower. We're going to go out to Houston to our flight commentator, Kyle Herring, for an update on how preparations have been going at the Johnson Space Center for an on-time liftoff this afternoon and the activities that Houston Flight has been doing to prepare for a launch today.
Well, thanks, George, and good afternoon from NASA's Johnson Space Center. This is Mission Control Houston at T-minus 9 minutes and holding. The Ascent team has been on console since 7 this morning and is led by Flight Director Richard Jones, overseeing his third launch today. Handling communications with the crew aboard Atlantis is astronaut Charlie Hobaugh, with astronaut Steve Frick serving as the interface with astronaut Lee Archambault, who is flying weather reconnaissance around the Kennedy Space Center in a modified Gulfstream aircraft. The flight control team is monitoring all systems aboard the Space Shuttle, along with the launch team there at the Kennedy Space Center, and have just notified the flight director that they're all ready to support the 32nd launch of Atlantis this afternoon. The Ascent team has spent the majority of the day evaluating the weather conditions at the launch site in the event an emergency return to the shuttle landing facility is required. The team also evaluates weather at contingency runways in Spain and in France. Presently, conditions are favorable to support an overseas landing if one becomes necessary during the launch phase. Because Atlantis is launching into a 51.6-degree inclination, essentially on a northeasterly trajectory from the Kennedy Space Center, the primary oceanic abort landing site today will be Zaragoza in Spain, with Morón in Spain and Istres, France, those two sites available as backup if necessary. Once Atlantis lifts off and clears the launch tower, on its onboard guidance system will maneuver the orbiter to a heads-down position, putting it on the proper course and trajectory to achieve the desired orbit. At main engine cutoff, Atlantis will be in a 136 by 36 statute-mile orbit. About 30 minutes later, that orbit will be refined using the twin Orbital Manoeuvring System engines, placing the orbiter in a 141 by 98 statute-mile altitude for on-orbit operations. The launch actually serves as the first in a series of rendezvous burns designed to allow Atlantis to catch up with the International Space Station. Docking is scheduled just before 10:30 Eastern Time Sunday morning. At launch time, the space station, at an altitude of 220 statute miles, will be located above the South Pacific. 73 paces from the shuttle flight control room resides a team overseeing operations aboard the International Space Station, and today that team is led by Flight Director Bob Dempsey. After Atlantis' launch and about 30 seconds into the flight, the 3 main engines will be throttled back to lessen the effects of the dense lower atmosphere on the orbiter. Less than a minute later, the shuttle will have accelerated to a speed of nearly 3,700 miles per hour at the point where the twin solid rocket boosters burn out and separate at 2 minutes 4 seconds. Once in orbit, Atlantis' 3 main engines will be shut down at the 8.5-minute point, followed just a few seconds later by the separation of the large external fuel tank. All continues to go smoothly here in Mission Control, with flight controllers standing by to take over control of Atlantis and the STS-132 mission at solid rocket booster ignition. George, we'll toss it back to you in the firing room there at the Kennedy Space Center for the remainder of Atlantis' launch count. At T-minus 9 minutes and holding, this is Mission Control Houston.
And back in firing room 4 at the Launch Control Center here at Kennedy Space Center, we have 34 minutes and 15 seconds remaining in this planned built-in hold.
And Team QC, NTD on 212.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Just want to verify that you copied our earlier conversation about IPR 45, that we, at this point, have rescinded that IPR requirement. That's going to be documented on local paper with MILA. It was not a constraint to launch. Just want to verify you copied that and have taken care of IPR 45.
That's affirmed. Copy and concur.
Thank you, sir.
OTC, CMPS.
MPS, go.
Okay, our depletion sensor simulated command removal and final checkout is complete and good. I can give you step 1114.
Copy.
NTD, this is a payload LSAM in firing room 2.
NTD, go ahead.
Yeah, I need to pick up an IPR on a possible lost ball bearing from a EVA camera pit pin. Apparently the ball bearing that was found on Tuesday on the aft bulkhead matches the same size as the ball bearings in the pit pins that holds the payload bay cameras at all 4 locations, forward and aft bulkheads.
Okay, I copy all. And let's see, we've got this documented previously on a lost and found PR.
That's correct.
Okay, and let's see, is this a constraint to launch at this time?
SCE, this is Wayne Pickford. Is this a constraint to launch at this time?
It is, Wayne, a hard constraint to launch. It's not only that we got to go do the analysis, but it is an MR condition that needs to have MR rationale presented by Orbital Project. So it is a constraint to launch.
Okay, copy. So yes, NTD, it is a constraint to launch.
Okay, I copy that. And let's see, at this point, SDE, are we going to, do we need to initiate another IPR, or just can we stay with the lost and found PR?
No, Jeremy, the lost and found PR was already closed as being acceptable and signed off by the systems. Additional rationale or additional analysis has shown that the lost ball bearing or the ball bearing we found may actually have come from one of the camera pit pins, and that's the analysis we need to go work on today. So what I'd like to go do is take that next IPR number based on Wayne's presentation to you, and Orbital Project is already working on trying to get us some flight rationale.
Okay, copy that, and Team QC will go ahead and take the next IPR number.
And 132 Victor 0045.
Copy that, and let's see, SPE and payloads will go ahead and kick you off on 161 to go continue that conversation and work towards completion of that MR.
Okay, and Jeremy, right now I really don't have an option except to constrain us coming out of the T-minus 9 minute hold.
I concur. That's going to be sequence 16, step 1156.
OTC. Step 1114, complete. 1115, not performed.
Copy, 1114, now perform 1115.
This is Shuttle Launch Control with 30 minutes remaining in this planned built-in hold. As we heard, there is something under discussion about a bearing from a camera system that has been found that needs a little bit further analysis beyond the closing of the problem report that we worked through the other day, now that that has been found. So as we heard, we will be pressing on toward our launch at 2:20. We've still got about 45 minutes before that, and it will be a constraint to coming out of the hold at T-9. So we've got a good half hour here, I guess, to go and talk about that some more. And we will try to bring you some further explanation on that as soon as it's available. The 6 astronauts flying aboard Atlantis on mission STS-132 are a veteran crew, each with prior shuttle flight experience. For Ken Ham, though, this is his first mission as commander. Here now he talks about preparing for the mission in this new and important role.
Whether you need to think about something or not, you feel obligated to think about what everyone else on the mission is doing all the time. And that ends up consuming a lot of thought. So I probably sleep less now. Not that that's a bad thing at all. I think my wife would agree that I'm probably a little bit more stressed out at home, although I try not to be stressed out. She says, I go home and I just don't say a lot. I don't talk about work. She says, well, that's showing stress. So I try to laugh more now. But it's really fun. It's an enjoyable task to try to pull everyone's needs in the whole team, the greater team, not just everybody on board, but in mission control and the engineering side, to pull it all together and make it all work. And I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Tony Antonelli is pilot for the mission. Tony credits playing college sports as well as his Navy flying experience as the two things that taught him a lot about teamwork. Now he discusses his task to support his STS-132 team members.
So I get all the important stuff. Ken Hawk is our mission commander, so he's ultimately responsible that everything gets done. But while he's busy keeping big picture situational awareness and running the mission, he hands off all the important things to me. On the way up, I'll be primarily responsible for the Space Shuttle main engines and making sure they're running correctly, and if they're not, figuring out the correct game plan to optimize our performance with whatever situation we have. Mm-hmm. On the way down, Hawk will be doing the landing, but I'll be putting the gear down. And I tell people, no matter how pretty of an approach he flies, if I don't put the gear down, his landing won't look too pretty.
To meet the goals for the mission, 3 spacewalks are scheduled. Mission specialist Mike Good is one of the spacewalkers. He talks about the Russian payload and what it will be used for.
Right, so in our payload bay, starting in the back in the aft section of the payload bay will be a Russian module. It's called MRM-1. It's a Mini-Research Module. It's similar to MRM-2 that went up to station already. Mm-hmm. It's basically going to be a docking extender to go on the Russian segment. So it'll be a place for them to bring Soyuz up. Because we just put Node 3 up there on the station, we need to put this docking extender so that they still have access to that docking port on the bottom or the nadir side of the FGB, one of the Russian modules. It'll also serve as kind of a logistics place to put things, a big closet up there on the space station.
Garrett Reisman is a former resident of the International Space Station on Expedition 16 and 17. Garrett gives us a synopsis of what his key objectives are for this mission.
And my job is actually to go out on the tip of the robot arm out during the spacewalk, grab the boom first, and then while I hold onto the boom, they fly me up to the top of the space station, and then Steve and I will plant that thing like a flag in the very, very top. And then I go back and get the dish, and we put the dish on top of the boom. And that's going to be crazy because I'm going to be flying back and forth, and at one point the robot arm comes straight up on the top of the space station. I'm going to be sticking way up there in the tip, and I've seen pictures of that thing. It looks kind of scary. So, but it also looks really amazing. I'm bringing a camera, so I want to take some good shots so I could come back and show you what that was like, because I'm going to be freaking out again, I'm pretty sure.
Mission Specialist Steve Bowen will also be spacewalking on the mission. Besides spacewalks, Steve has some very important mid-deck responsibilities.
Well, as Mission Specialist 3, mostly the mid-deck. I'm flying up and down on the mid-deck, and so initially when we get to orbit, Piers and I will set up the mid-deck and get everybody out of their launch and entry suits and back and functioning, and coming back home, Garrett and I are in the mid-deck, and we'll get everybody dressed up again and turn the mid-deck back into a landing vehicle. So those are the primary portions of that aspect of the mission for me.
Piers Sellers is Mission Specialist 4 for this flight and will be crucial to the success of the mission as operator of the robotic arm.
Mainly I'll be working with the arm, the station arm, supporting the spacewalk. So while the guys are outside, I'll be moving stuff around for them, and sometimes moving them around. And also be helping Garrett move this Russian module from the payload bay and the shuttle all the way across the Russian segment, plugging it in. And I'll be on the little Russian laptop talking to that thing, trying to make it do jobs during that process. And I think one of the things I'm really looking forward to is on the way home, I'll get to sit on the flight deck with a flight crew, and I've never done that before, so that'll be interesting.
We now have 27 minutes 50 seconds remaining in this planned built-in hold, and the launch team has been advised that we will be targeting the planned T0 of 2:20 this afternoon, which is in the middle of the launch window. We'll be continuing to shoot for that for the time being. As we've heard, we are working to try to dispose of one issue as quickly as possible, and hopefully that will not be a constraint to coming out of our hold at T-minus 9 minutes. But as of right now, we are still planning toward a 2:20 p.m. launch time. With 27 minutes, 9 seconds remaining in this built-in hold at T-minus 9 minutes and holding, this is Shuttle Launch Control.
NTD Houston flight on 212.
Go ahead, Houston flight.
Yes, I have polled my team, and we will need step 1116, and we can call the crew with that ascent data crew update at this time if you concur.
Yes, sir, I concur. You've got to go to proceed.
Copy that. We'll put that in work.
Atlantis, Houston for an update on weather.
Ready to copy.
Hey, Hawk, weather at KSC is obviously shaping up mighty fine. Update to the RTLS altimeter would be 3025. I know we had you type in 23 earlier, but that's your latest update. For TAL sites, we do have 3 TAL sites available. Zaragoza will be prime. It will require a close-in aim point. The 2-engine TAL call will be based on Morone. And Istris is also available, as we said, also strong wind, so that will probably be a close-in aim if we need it, but it's down in the weeds.
Okay, Sparks, we copy the altimeter. We'll reset it to 30.25. We'll update the TAL site to Zaragoza. If we got that far, we would go close in. And we'll get over to Spec 50 and make that happen right now.
Good read back, and we'll be basing our 2-engine TAL call on Morone.
Yeah, copy that.
And SPE NTD.
NTD SPE with you, sir.
Yes, sir. I know we're currently working IPR 45 discussion, looking to see if the IPR 44 work had been completed and if we can clear IPR 44 from our constraints.
44 is complete, and it's been submitted to TARE for closure and removal from the constraints list already.
Okay, copy that.
Yeah, so Jeremy, that one should be clearing, and only 45 is a true technical constraint.
Okay, we'll stand by. And Houston flight NTD. And Houston flight NTD on 212.
NTD Houston flight, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Just want to verify that all your work on 1016 is complete.
That is correct. We have finished updating the crew, and we require no other updates.
Okay, copy that.
This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 21 minutes, or T-minus 9 minutes, and holding with 21 minutes remaining in this built-in hold. Our Launch Weather Officer, Todd McNamara, advises now that we are down to only a 10% chance of having a weather problem today. This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 9 minutes and holding, with just over 20 minutes remaining in this planned built-in hold. Joining us now on the console is Pete Nikolenko, the Assistant Launch Director for the STS-132 countdown today. And Pete, we just heard on the air-to-ground channel about an issue that the launch team has been working, and we're wondering if you could explain that to us in other than pure engineering terms and tell us what this might mean for our launch today or how we're working through it.
Well, good afternoon. First off, let me say that the vehicle really is in excellent shape, and at this point the weather looks good, and I think by and large we're in ready to fly posture. What we did just hear words about just a short bit ago was related to some 1/8 inch ball bearing that was found out in the payload bay a couple of days ago on Tuesday that we noted just prior to closing the payload bay doors for flight. And we found it on the aft bulkhead, which is effectively the backside of the payload bay. And we had some right engineering disciplines talk about it on Tuesday. And before we did close the doors for flight, the folks effectively testified that they did not believe it to be a flight hardware, any kind of lost or located flight hardware. And what we did find is that by looking closer at the vendor drawings, that some of the dimensional analysis said that this little ball bearing that we had found the other day actually might have been part of what is known as a pit pin. And there are 3 pit pins on each one of 4 cameras that the spacewalkers use when we're on orbit performing the spacewalks. And so right now at this point we've got the right folks, the Orbiter Project and other folks, just wanting to verify that if in fact it is that ball bearing, that it would not affect the ability of these pins to hold the cameras in place, and that we're in fact good for launch and for the mission. I believe that'll be the case. We're just letting the experts come back to us over the next few minutes to give us that final word.
And explain to us again how this issue came up again exactly at this point.
Well, what ended up happening, using the right engineering rigor that we're accustomed to do, folks, we saw the initial dimensional analysis that we saw a couple of days ago, and we believe that we were okay. But we looked and dug deeper and realized that some of the vendor paperwork and requirements drawings that showed it to a closer, more detailed dimension caused us to give cause and for pause, effectively, to realize that this, in fact, might be part of these pins. So it was just digging deeper and looking at it and tracking it very further over the past couple of days. And it just happened to be a timing case where we just learned over the past several minutes that folks wanted to talk about it, and we put the issue before the launch and the mission management team.
So based on the discussion we've had up to this point, do we think there's optimism we'll be able to work through this in time to make our launch today?
Oh, absolutely. I'm optimistic that we'll disposition it, and I'm confident that we'll be good, but we wanted to make sure we give it the right engineering and technical rigor.
Well, Pete, thanks very much, and we'll stand by for the good words, and hopefully we'll be pressing on here very shortly.
Absolutely.
16 minutes, 48 seconds remaining in this built-in hold. At T-minus 9 minutes and holding, this is Shuttle Launch Control.
STC-CVD.
Go ahead, CVD.
Yes, I can give you step 1124, payload bay purge flow rate set to launch. I know 11-15 is not performed.
Copy 1121, not performed.
That's
NTDSC.
Go ahead, SC.
Sir, looking to give you here a final brief on IPR number 45, which is our missing, our found ball bearing from a missing from a pit pin.
Okay, I'm ready.
So we talked it on 161. Orbiter Project went through, along with the ground ops guys. They looked at the history of any of these failures. We've never had a failure like this in the past. The pit pins are tethered. The installation was verified during installation. The proper pit pin installation was verified. The one ball bearing that we did find on the lost and found PR, we believe that that was one only, and it's highly unlikely that it actually came from the pit pin based on the way it's manufactured. We believe that the pit pin still has good, by dimensional analysis, has a good fit into the cameras. If it were in fact from one of the cameras in the payload bay, review of closeout photos showed that all pit pins were in place, and based on that and the discussion we had with SSPO 161, we are recommending to remove this IPR from the constraints list and requesting TMRB chair concurrence to go ahead and remove this IPR.
Okay, I copy all, and sounds like you've got good flight rationale, and at this point you're calling IPR 45 no longer a constraint and requesting taking that off of the constraints list, and I concur with that recommendation.
And NTD, ST.
Go ahead, SC.
Let's see, what I'd like to do as PMRB chair, I would like to formally request that CMQC remove IPR 0045 from the constraints list based on the technical rationale and risk acceptance by the program, and we will take that as a deferred IPR, transfer it over to the folks to go do a post-flight evaluation and go understand our configuration for our pit pins once we get 104 back from flight.
Okay, I copy that, and let's see, CMQC NTD.
Yes, sir, we copied that, and that's taken care of.
All right, very good, and SVG copy?
C copies.
All right, and we'll call IPR 45 cleared from the constraints list, and at this time we have no constraints to the T-minus 9-minute resume, and no constraints remaining.
This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 9 minutes and holding with just a few seconds over 10 minutes remaining in this planned built-in hold. And as we heard, our NASA Test Director, Jeremy Graber, has concurred with the mission management team's recommendation that we continue and proceed toward a launch today at 2:20 this afternoon and picking up on time to come out of the planned built-in hold at T-minus 9 minutes, which will occur just over 9 minutes from now. And no other engineering issues out there right now. So with weather cooperating, we appear to be still targeting a 2:20 p.m. liftoff this afternoon.
TISL, JRPS, and Houston flight. Perform L-minus 15-minute recorder activation. Step 1118.
ISL copies in work.
JRPS copy.
And Houston flight copies in work.
MS1, MS4, activate V10 recorders.
MS1, operation recorders in work. MS4, port.
And that was Orbiter Test Conductor Teresa Annulus giving the flight crew some instructions for activating the flight recorders. We'll hear her very shortly wishing the crew well as we get into our final go and the polls for launch.
And attention on the net, this is the NTD performing the launch status checks. Verify ready to resume count and go for launch. OTC.
OTC is go.
TBC.
TBC is go.
PTC.
PTC is go.
LPS.
LPS is go.
Houston flight.
Houston flight is go.
Mila.
Mila's go.
STM.
STM is go.
Safety console.
Safety consoles go.
SPE.
SCE is go.
LRD.
LRD is go.
SRO.
SRO is go. You have range clear to launch.
And CDR.
Atlantis is go.
I copy all. And Launch Director NTD.
Launch Director.
Yes, sir. At this time, the launch team is ready to proceed.
I copy that, Jeremy. Thank you. KC Chief Processing Engineer. Verify no constraints to launch.
No constraints.
Thank you, Steve. Payload Launch Manager.
Mike, for our Russian partners and the rest of the ISS processing team, we'll go.
Copy that. Thanks, Bill. KC Safety and Mission Assurance.
KC Safety and Mission Assurance is go, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Range Weather.
Weather has no constraints for launch, Mike.
Copy. Ops Manager.
Mike, the MMT's in good shape. Shuttle program is go to let you launch Atlantis.
Okay, copy that. Thank you. Atlantis Launch Director.
Go, sir.
Okay, Hawk, on behalf of all the manufacturing, processing, flight, and launch teams that have worked on Atlantis since March of 1980, I'd like to wish you all good luck, Godspeed, and have a little fun up there.
Thanks, Mike. Those are great words. And like you said, there's 1,000 of folks out there that have taken care of this bird for a long time. Right now, a special thanks to Orbiter for getting us off the pad today. And we're going to take her on our 30-second flight. And if you don't mind, we'll take her out of the barn and make a few more laps around the planet. Nove Rassvet Prihodit na Stansiu. Payekli.
Thanks, Hawk. I understood all that. And we'll try to get you out of here on time.
You're the man.
And NTD Launch Director, you are clear to launch Atlantis.
Copy that, Launch Director. And attention on the net, the countdown clock will resume from T-minus 9 minutes and 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
NGD ISL, recorder activation is complete.
Copy that, ISL.
Standing by now to pick up the count in 30 seconds. Picking up in 15. Picking up in 10.
The countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
T-minus 9 minutes and counting.
CLS auto sequence has been initiated.
The ground launch sequencer, the primary computer here in the firing room, is now in control of the countdown. We'll be checking over 1,000 parameters in the launch sequence for Space Shuttle Atlantis in the next 9 minutes. Onboard flight data recorders have been activated.
TLT, OTC, connect essential buses to fuel cells per your checklist.
OTC, TLT, that's in work.
T-minus 8 minutes, transmitting the stored final program pre-launch commands.
OTC, PLT, essential buses connected to fuel cells.
Copy.
Beginning now to retract the crew orbiter access arm.
Let's go for orbiter access arm retract.
Atlantis crew, our team has worked hard, and it's with great pride that we send the first last crew of Atlantis to the International Space Station with the Mini-Research Module to be installed.
Well put.
Teresa Annulus, our orbiter test conductor today from United Space Alliance. T-minus 7 minutes. Next, the pilot will perform the auxiliary power unit pre-start in about...
CRPS, OTC, start APU display recorders. CRPS, recorders are running. CLT, perform APU pre-start.
APU pre-start, inward.
Next major milestone will be at T-minus 5 minutes when the orbiter's auxiliary power units will be started.
OTC, PLT, APU pre-start complete.
Copy.
And at that time, the data recorders here in the firing room will be started. T-minus 5 minutes and counting.
CLS is go for orbiter APU start.
CLT, perform APU start.
APU start, inward.
CDR, reconfigure heaters.
Heater reconfigure work.
Solid rocket booster safe and armed devices is now being armed.
OTC and PLT APU start and heater reconfig complete.
Copy.
T-minus 4 minutes and counting.
CLS is go for purge sequence 4.
Starting the orbiter aerosurface profile test. That will be followed by a steering check of Atlantis' 3 main engines. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. Verifying the main engines are in start position.
CLS is go for EP LO2 pressurization.
Preparing now to retract the gaseous oxygen vent arm, the GOX beanie cap, the vent hood.
CLT, OTC, clear caution warning memory, verify no unexpected errors.
Fuel cells going to internal reactants.
OTC, PLT, caution warning clear, no unexpected errors.
Copy. Atlantis, close and lock your visors and initiate O2.
OTC, that is in work.
T-minus 2 minutes and counting.
CLS is go for EP LH2 pressurization.
Activating the cameras on the solid rocket boosters.
One minute, 30 seconds.
Sound suppression water system is now armed.
One minute.
Ground launch sequencer will hand off to Atlantis' onboard flight computers at T-minus 31 seconds. About 15 seconds from now. Solid rocket booster flight data recorders are activated. T-minus 31 seconds. The handoff has occurred.
25.
Solid rocket booster nozzle gimbal check. Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And 0 and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, reaching the crest of its historic achievements in space.
Houston, Atlantis is in a roll.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is complete. Atlantis is in a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 136 by 36 statute mile orbit. 3 main engines on Atlantis have now been throttled down to 72% of rated thrust as the orbiter prepares to pass through the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle in the lower atmosphere. The engine's now beginning to throttle back up.
Atlantis, you are go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 engines looking really good, back at full throttle now at liftoff. The fully fueled shuttle, boosters, and external tank weighed 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that liftoff weight in propellant. 1 minute, 30 seconds into the flight, all 3 auxiliary power units that provide hydraulic power to the orbiter's systems in good shape, as are the fuel cells providing electricity to all of the systems on board. Atlantis is already 19 miles in altitude, downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 20 miles, traveling 2,500 miles per hour. Coming up on staging, the point at which the twin solid rocket boosters burn out and separate from the orbiter. Booster separation confirmed. The onboard guidance system has done its job of settling out any of the dispersions that have been introduced at the booster separation. Atlantis' performance thus far is exactly as planned as Atlantis heads into orbit, flying heads down, wings level into a historic sunset on its 30-second mission.
Atlantis, you are 2-engine TAL.
Copy, 2-engine TAL.
Atlantis can now reach Zaragoza in Spain in the event of a single engine failure. However, all 3 main engines are still operating at full throttle, 104% of rated thrust. The auxiliary power unit's still in great shape, as are the fuel cells. Atlantis is traveling 3,700 miles per hour at an altitude of 47 miles, downrange from the Kennedy Space Center now 88 miles. Atlantis is getting a boost from the Orbital Manoeuvring System engines on the tail of the vehicle. Those have been burning now for about 1.5 minutes.
Atlantis, you are negative return.
Copy, Scorch, negative return.
Negative return means Atlantis can no longer return to the Kennedy Space Center in the event of an engine failure. It's already traveling too high and too fast to return to the launch site. Now traveling 6,000 miles per hour, 180 miles from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 62 miles, or about 330,000 feet. This view from a camera on the external tank looking down the length of the orbiter as Atlantis heads into orbit on its 32nd voyage into space.
Atlantis, you are pressed to ATO.
Copy, press to ATO.
Atlantis can reach orbit on 2 engines should one fail at this point. However, all 3 are still in great shape. I've got a report that the flash evaporator system providing cooling to all of the systems is also operating normally as well. Atlantis is traveling 7,700 miles per hour, 278 miles downrange, 67 miles out in altitude.
are single engine ops 3.
Copy, single engine ops 3.
Standing by for the guidance system to take over control of Atlantis and roll the vehicle to a heads-up position. This roll to heads-up allows for...
Atlantis, you are pressed to MECO and single engine Zaragoza 104.
Copy, press to MECO, single engine Zaragoza 104.
Atlantis can reach a safe orbit on 2 engines now.
Lucky dog.
That reference to the guidance system's choice of the roll maneuver.
A nominal shutdown on all 3. You will be go for the plus X, go for the pitch.
Atlantis copies, nominal shutdown, go for the plus X, go for the pitch.
Good readback.
And that roll to heads up provides a good satellite communications link with Atlantis, continuing its travel into space, approaching 7 minutes into the flight.
Atlantis, you are single engine press 104.
Copy, single engine press 104.
Atlantis can reach orbit on 1 engine now should 2 fail. However, all 3 are still in good shape. Atlantis is now traveling 13,000 miles per hour, 580 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 340,000 feet, or about 64 miles. Shortly, the 3 main engines will begin throttling back to maintain the structural limits on the orbiter as it approaches loads near 3 times gravity. All quiet here in Mission Control with all systems in great shape. Atlantis is traveling 15,500 miles per hour, approaching 8 minutes into the flight, downrange 740 miles at an altitude of 64 miles, 337,000 feet. Standing by for main engine cutoff confirmation as Atlantis is in excellent shape heading into orbit. Main engine cutoff confirmed, standing by for separation from the external fuel tank. Atlantis now flying away from the external tank after separation. Plus X burn maneuver being performed by Commander Ken Ham.
Nominal MECO, ohms 1 not required. Preliminary ohms 2 TIG will be 37:30. We'll meet you in the post-ohms 1 procedure, and welcome back to space for you and your veteran crew.
Copy, 3730. It's good to be back, Scorch, as you know. And ohms 1 is not required.
Good read.
Here in Mission Control in Houston now, after a clean ascent of Atlantis on its final voyage into space. 10.5 minutes ago. Now on board, the crew has completed a +X maneuver flying away from the external tank. Mission Specialist Steve Bowen will unstrap and float up to the flight deck. He'll be grabbing a 400mm lens camera to document the external tank with still photography at a distance of about 1,400 feet. Garrett Reisman, seated behind pilot Tony Antonelli for the ride to orbit, will gather some high-definition video of the tank from the other overhead window. That footage is expected to be downlinked to imagery experts that are here in Mission Control for review of the tank's thermal protection system performance. A very clean ascent. It was very quiet here in the flight control room, all the way uphill. All of the systems performed as expected aboard Atlantis. The next activity will be a orbital maneuvering system burn known as OMS-2, which will provide a stable orbit for Atlantis. The orbiter currently is in a 136 by 36 statute mile orbit, a fairly highly elliptical orbit that will allow it eventually, over the course of the next day and a half, to catch up with the International Space Station, which is in a much higher orbit at 220 statute miles. The result of the OMS-2 burn upcoming in about 25 minutes will be to raise both sides of Atlantis' orbit from 136 on the high side up to 141.5, and then on the low side from 36 up to 98. Over the course of the next hour and a half, the spacecraft will be turned into an on-orbit vehicle.
Per the checklist, we will be ready for APU hide shutdown, and on the following page, 3-4, tail-only control not required. Everything else will be as published. You are go for 105 when you get ready.
Okay, Squirt, we copy. We'll get the hide MTS TVCs, APU shutdown, tail-only control not required, no other deltas. You're ready for 105 when we get there.
Good readback.
Flight Director Richard Jones talking with the flight control team, walking through the steps in the ascent checklist, following along with the crew through the ascent checklist to configure the orbiter for on-orbit operations. They'll transition from the ascent checklist to the post-insertion checklist that the crew has on board as well. That will step through a number of procedures, including opening the payload bay doors, activating the radiators that line the inside of those payload bay doors. Once those radiators are activated, they will provide heat radiation away from the vehicle for the on-orbit phase of the flight.